to truly accept oneself completely, without exceptions, embracing every contradiction, wound, desire, and shadow, is one of the most courageous and captivating journeys a woman can take. Because true allure is not rooted in youth, nor in appearances. It is not found in smooth skin or a perfectly sculpted body. There are women who, though no longer young by society's standards, can silence an entire room just by walking in, not because they seek attention, but because they no longer need it. They carry a different kind of energy, a quiet force, a steady light that doesn't radiate from the surface. It rises from within, from an inner life that has made peace with itself. These women no longer run from their shadow. They don't chase validation. They've stopped playing the role of the good girl in order to be loved. They have accepted every part of themselves. And from that place, they rise not perfect, but free. True magnetism is never a strategy. It is a resonance, the crystallized depth of a soul that has matured from within. If you've ever felt torn between being soft and being strong, stay a while. There is a deeper path where both can belong, and neither has to disappear. What follows are 5 subtle behaviors shared by women who are genuinely magnetic. Not learned through surface-level training, but born through the sacred journey back to the true self, what Carl Jung described as the deepest privilege of a lifetime. Number 1. She lives from the self, no longer ruled by the ego. There is something extraordinary about truly mature women. They don't need to shine in order to be seen. They don't strive to be loved. They are not living to please. They are living in truth deeply, wholly with who they are. When she walks into a room, you don't feel effort or noise. You feel presence, a quiet gravity, grounded and full, a kind of energy that can't quite be named, but makes you pause, makes you linger. What creates that kind of magnetism, Carl Jung called it, the self, the center of the human soul, the total essence of who we are destined to become. In his analytical psychology, Jung drew a clear distinction. The ego is the smaller self, what we use to navigate the outer world. But the self is something far greater. The self is the full being that transcends the ego. In The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, he wrote, "The self is not only the center, but also the whole circumference, which embraces both consciousness and the unconscious. It is the center of this totality, just as the ego is the center of consciousness. The ego governs only the conscious mind, but the self contains it all, both the conscious and the unconscious realms. A woman who radiates from the soul has broken free from the ego's grip. She has begun living from her center, her truth. And this isn't some abstract idea. You can see it in real life. A woman still ruled by the ego lives in constant effort. She feels she must be beautiful to be worthy, obedient to be loved, agreeable to avoid rejection. Her sense of self is fragile, easily rattled by the opinions of others. Her spirit is bruised when her work goes unseen or unacknowledged. But a woman living from the self is made of something different. She carries a spiritual backbone. She does not trade her inner truth for outward comfort. A powerful example of this is Maya Angelou, the American poet and civil rights icon. Despite enduring profound loss and pain, she lived with a core of inner freedom. She never let circumstances rob her of her truth. She once said, "I belong to myself." I am very proud of that. That is the voice of someone who has stepped away from a life of pleasing and entered the vast, quiet landscape of the self, where a woman begins to live for the integrity of her being. Jung believed that one of the clearest signs someone is living from the self is their ability to set boundaries, not cruelly, but firmly, without fear of being disliked. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, he wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The greatest gift in life isn't to be unconditionally loved by everyone. It is to live in alignment with your truest nature, even if it comes at the cost of comfort or others' approval." That is the source of a different kind of magnetism. A woman like that doesn't need to seem strong. She simply is. She's no longer ruled by the fear of rejection. When she says no, she doesn't over-explain. And when she says yes, it's because her soul agrees, not because she's afraid to upset anyone. Others may not always understand it clearly, but they feel it. The steadiness, the clarity, the consistency in her energy. In a chaotic and uncertain world, that kind of inner stability is the most primal, instinctive form of attraction. If you pay close attention, you'll notice something unusual. These women don't often talk about self-worth. Yet somehow, everyone around them knows they have it. That's because they aren't living to prove. They're living to express the truth of who they really are. In an interview, actress Frances McDormand, known for her subtle, no-frills style, once said, "I'm not interested in playing the game. I'm interested in playing the truth." It is that very refusal to play the social game that makes her so compelling, so undeniably magnetic. When a woman no longer lives from the ego, no longer acts in ways just to be accepted or loved, she frees herself from fear-based reflexes. She doesn't rush to reply just to prevent being misunderstood. She doesn't shrink herself to remain desirable. She no longer waits to be chosen, because now she is the one doing the choosing. Jung called this wholeness not perfection, but the reconciliation of opposites within. A person who reaches this inner integration can sit in silence and never feel empty. She can be alone without feeling lonely. That is the kind of presence that draws others in, not with noise, but with depth. Biologically, we are drawn to what feels stable and secure. But on a deeper psychological level, we are drawn to those who are self-possessed, because they embody something many secretly yearn for: the freedom to be fully themselves without fear of punishment or rejection. When she no longer tries to be lovable, something paradoxical happens. She becomes profoundly lovable, because love is no longer a condition for her existence. Perhaps you've met a woman like this before. She's not dressed to impress. She's not the loudest voice in the room. But something about her holds you. You want to understand her. What you're sensing isn't her performance, it's her presence. Complete, effortless, at home in herself. Carl Jung emphasized that the journey toward living from the self is not an easy one. It demands a direct confrontation with all that lies beneath shame, pain, and the shadow. But when a woman finally transcends the ego, she is no longer shaped by external pressures. She becomes the axis of her own existence. And from that center, she doesn't just radiate magnetism. She awakens something real in everyone who shares her space. And if you've ever wondered how to live this way, Jung didn't leave us a formula, because there isn't one. But he did leave behind a message in the Red Book. Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. The mature woman, the magnetic woman, the truly free woman is the one who has awakened. She doesn't chase the spotlight. She is the light. Number 2, she has faced her shadow and no longer runs from herself, but to shine within her light. a woman must first walk through her own darkness. That kind of light isn't random. It doesn't appear by accident. It is forged in the fire of self-confrontation, in reckoning with all the pieces of herself she once tried to deny. Jung called this dimension of the psyche the shadow. He once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate, man and his symbols. Until we bring our unconscious into the light of awareness, it controls us, and we misread its control as destiny." A truly magnetic woman is not perpetually cheerful. She doesn't force herself to be positive all the time. She doesn't smooth over her rough edges to fit in. Instead, she looks straight at them, acknowledges them, learns to coexist with them without letting them dominate her. In Jungian thought, the shadow holds everything we're afraid to face. Jealousy, rage, the craving for control, deep insecurity, old unhealed wounds, all the traits deemed unacceptable by society. Most people are still governed by them, not because they are bad, but because they've never dared to face them. A mature woman no longer plays hide-and-seek with her darkness. She doesn't panic when she sees herself feeling angry, selfish, or even domineering. She understands every part of her, light or dark, exists for a reason. Instead of faking it by saying, "I'm fine," she has the courage to say, "I'm hurting." Instead of striving to be the perfect woman, she chooses to be a real one. Have you ever met someone who made you feel truly at ease? Not because they were always kind, but because they never judged you. They gave you space to be human, even in your messy, tired moments. That kind of presence doesn't come from natural grace. It comes from personal familiarity with one's own darkness. She knows what it feels like to be jealous, to be irrationally sad, to be hurt so deeply she could become cruel. And because of that experience, she holds deep compassion for others. Those who have forgiven themselves never need to climb by tearing others down. So pause. Take a moment to reflect. Have you ever tried to hide the ugly emotions? Pretended you weren't jealous, or angry, or afraid? Be honest. What part of your shadow is still hardest for you to accept? Carl Jung never told us to become better. He invited us to become more honest. In Psychological Aspects of the Personality, he wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." You don't grow spiritually by covering yourself in light. You grow by making space for your darkness and bringing it into full awareness. The mature woman doesn't perform brilliance. She moves through life with deliberate awareness. She doesn't react on impulse when emotion rises. She isn't swept away by it because she's already walked through the fire and learned how to witness it. This doesn't make her distant or cold. In fact, it makes her warm in a way that feels deeply grounded. She doesn't rely on being loved to feel worthy. And she doesn't suppress her anger just to appear gentle. This balance between light and shadow makes her strangely approachable. Not because she's flawless, but because she no longer needs to be. Think of Elizabeth Gilbert, author of Eat, Pray, Love. On her journey, she wasn't just looking for love. She was looking for herself after heartbreak. She spoke honestly about jealousy, rebellion, and the desire to control. And she learned to sit still with her shadows, not judging them, not fleeing from them. It was that radical honesty that allowed millions to see themselves in her. Not because she was perfect, but because she lived her imperfection truthfully. Inner magnetism does not come from making others think well of you. It comes from releasing the need for them to. You've seen yourself, and you've made peace with what you saw. A woman like that emits an energy that feels safe to others. I don't have to perform around her, and neither does she. No one wants to live forever caught between a false identity and a buried shadow. A mature woman chooses to leave that performance behind and steps into wholeness. Jung didn't write theories just for intellectual analysis. He wrote to spark transformation. He believed that true change happens the moment we stop denying the shadow and begin to own it. In Ion Researches into the Phenomenology of the Self, he wrote, "To confront a person with his shadow is to show him his light. Facing the darkness is not separate from finding the light. It is the doorway to it." The more honestly a woman acknowledges her inner darkness, the more quietly and steadily she begins to shine. That's what makes her so compelling, not because she's strong at enduring, but because she understands herself deeply enough that she no longer needs to armor up. She doesn't need charm. She doesn't need to submit. She doesn't even need suffering. What she offers is real presence, unguarded. And have you ever sat with your own jealousy, with your anger, your fear? Have you ever stopped running and simply sat with them, letting them be? If so, share it with me in the comments. Where are you right now in your journey of facing your own shadow? Because it is only when you embrace both the beautiful and the not-so-beautiful within you that you become whole, and from that wholeness free. Number 3, she integrates both anima and animus within herself. But the wholeness Carl Jung described doesn't end at confronting the shadow. It continues deeper, subtler toward inner integration. That includes a reconciliation between the masculine and feminine energies within the soul. Jung named these forces animus, the masculine archetype within a woman's psyche, and anima, the feminine archetype within a man's psyche. In Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, he wrote, "Every man carries within him the eternal image of woman, not the image of this or that individual woman, but a definite feminine image. This unconscious image is best described as an archetype, and the same is true for women. Inside every woman lives a masculine archetype as well. A woman who is not yet psychologically mature often finds herself trapped by social expectations around gender. She may overemphasize her femininity in order to be loved gentle, agreeable, soft, until she loses her strength. Or she might lean heavily into power, logic, and control to prove her independence, to show that she needs no one. Both extremes reveal a misalignment between her inner anima and animus. Jung believed this imbalance was one of the root causes of deep confusion, emptiness, and relational instability. A truly magnetic woman doesn't fall into either extreme. She is neither hyper-feminine nor so forceful that she loses her capacity to receive. She holds a rare kind of energy, as if she is both tender and fierce, soft-spoken, yet sharply insightful. She can sit and truly listen. And when needed, she can rise and speak without trembling. She can say, "You're free to go," with grace and still remain unforgettable. That's because her animus doesn't overpower her inner feminine, and her anima doesn't smother her strength. The two work together in harmony. Have you ever felt torn, wanting to care for others, but also needing your own voice heard, wishing for someone strong to lead, yet rejecting control when it arrives? That tension isn't a flaw. It's a signal, an invitation to tune in to the dual energies already moving within you. So ask yourself, with honesty, do you tend to lean toward receptivity, your feminine energy, or toward control and logic, your masculine side? Feel free to share your truth below. Because real magnetism doesn't come from performing a role. It comes from a state of alignment, an integration few people dare to reach. A woman who balances her anima and animus radiates an energy that feels unknowable, in the best way. And that mystery is exactly what draws people closer. Jung once wrote in Psychological Types, "The possession of a secret makes the possessor mysterious, gives him a sense of importance, and increases his self-confidence." When a woman holds part of her energy close, not because she's hiding, but because she doesn't need to reveal everything just to be accepted, she preserves something powerful, the power of the undiscovered. If you want a vivid example of a woman who lives in that harmony, think of Michelle Obama. She is a warm mother and devoted partner, but also a brilliant speaker and relentless advocate for justice. In her memoir Becoming, she wrote, "There is no limit to what we as women can accomplish, but perhaps even more striking. She never had to give up her femininity to accomplish those things. She didn't fight against her inner energies. She brought them into balance. A woman like that knows when to step back and observe, and when to step forward and lead. She isn't afraid to take initiative, but she also doesn't see being loved or protected as weakness. She avoids falling into either trap, being too soft or too cold, because she understands that real strength and real gentleness are not opposites. This adaptability is what gives her that deep magnetism. People can't easily define her, and that's precisely why they're drawn in. There's a depth there, a richness they haven't fully touched. Have you ever been struck by someone who wasn't trying hard at all, but somehow always said or did just enough, just at the right moment? A glance that lingered? A smile held for half a second too long? A single line that landed exactly where it needed to? That's the signature of balanced inner power. A soul where opposites don't battle, but dance in harmony. Jung called this the union of opposites. It is a critical milestone on the path of individuation. To be clear, this doesn't mean the woman is always composed and centered. She still gets tired. She still tilts too far one way at times. But the difference is she notices. She doesn't stay off balance for long. She returns to her core, back to inner equilibrium. And if you've found yourself leaning too far into one energy, too rational, too emotional, too controlling, too accommodating, that's not failure. That's your signal. It's the beginning of your return, your path to rebalancing, and that journey back to inner harmony. That is what makes you magnetic, not because of how you appear on the outside, but because of how deeply, honestly, and wholly you live. And Jung wrote, "The self is made manifest through the process of integrating opposites. It is through the unification of those inner tensions that the true essence begins to emerge." The self, your deepest, truest nature, only comes forward when the opposing forces within are reconciled. And the woman who has done this no longer needs to label herself as strong or soft, independent or feminine. She is no longer shaped by anyone's template. She has become something else entirely. Herself, unpatterned, unopposed, unique. Think back to those moments when you felt most whole. Weren't they the times you felt grounded, yet wide open, assertive, yet deeply trusting? That's the dance of anima and animus in harmony. Not in conflict, but in rhythm. What's been hardest for you to integrate? Is it being assertive without feeling too much, or being soft while still holding your boundaries? Your story, when shared, doesn't just help you understand yourself more deeply, it also creates space for other women to find their own way toward freedom. Because in the end, the most magnetic woman isn't the one who excels at playing a role. It's the one who dares to drop them all and live fully, truthfully, completely. Number 4, she lives with purpose, not to fill a void. And once she has shed the masks, the roles imposed from the outside, what remains a life with direction, a purpose that rises beyond the desire to be loved, needed, or recognized. At the deepest level of attraction, where it's no longer about gender or looks, what draws us in is something else. It's the meaning she lives for. As Carl Jung once wrote in The Undiscovered Self, "The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it." Even the smallest thing, if it carries purpose, holds more value than something grand that lacks it. A mature woman no longer exists just to fill a space inside her. She doesn't search for a partner just to ease loneliness. She doesn't accept just anyone to avoid being alone. She has cultivated a deep and living relationship with herself. So when she loves from fullness, not from lack. Love, to her, is resonance, not rescue. The person who comes into her life isn't her destination. They're simply a companion on a journey she already began alone. Have you ever seen someone walk into a room and immediately draw your attention without needing to try? She might not be conventionally striking, but her eyes light up when she speaks about what she's building. It could be a community project, an art space, a meditation group, or simply the wholehearted way she raises her children. When someone lives with real purpose, they don't need an introduction. Their energy introduces them. So ask yourself, what are you living for? Are you pouring your time and spirit into being loved, being accepted, being part of a pair? Or did you once touch something that set your heart racing, only to abandon it because no one else believed in it, because you feared being left behind? Share your truth, because it might just be the beginning of the very path you've been looking for. Jung never saw emptiness as a flaw. He saw it as a signal, a whisper from the soul, calling for something deeper. In Modern Man, in Search of a Soul, he wrote, "What you are looking for is not in books or theories. It is the experience of meaning that saves you from despair. It's not found in clever ideas or perfect plans. It's found in lived purpose. A woman who has found that no longer needs to fight to be seen, because she already sees herself." One powerful example is Malala Yousafzai, the young woman who survived an assassination attempt for standing up for girls' education. Despite enduring unimaginable physical and emotional trauma, she chose not to retreat. She chose to move forward, because she didn't live to be liked. She lived for something far greater than herself. Her purpose was so clear, so rooted in truth, that she became one of the most powerful feminist figures in the world. A woman like that doesn't need someone to save her. She doesn't expect her partner to complete her, because joy already lives in her. She can love deeply, truly, but without clinging, without manipulation, without begging. If love arrives, she welcomes it. If it leaves, she understands it's not the end, because she knows she's not half a person waiting to be completed. She is a full circle. Now imagine a woman like that entering your life, or imagine her emerging from within you. She wakes up each day with a quiet certainty. I have a reason to be here, not to chase messages, not to be pursued, not to be validated, but because something greater than herself calls her to serve. Her allure doesn't stem from being wanted. It comes from building something meaningful. If you've ever sat in a cafe early in the morning, you may have seen a woman like that. She's sitting alone, a laptop beside her, a weathered notebook open. Not a phone flashing with someone's attention, but pages filled with a project she's nurturing. Maybe it's a neighborhood art class, a small parenting blog, a values-based business helping families create income. She isn't loud, she isn't trying to look important, yet her presence is unmistakable, still, steady, vibrant. When she speaks to the barista, she's polite, but her eyes are somewhere else, fixed on a vision only she can see. And if someone were to ask her, "Why aren't you just waiting for love to come?" she might smile and reply, "Because I'm busy living a life I'm proud of." She's known pain. She's waited before waited for someone to make life worth living. But eventually, she learned no one else can fill a void you create by abandoning yourself. So instead of waiting, she turned inward. She asked herself, "What makes me feel most alive when I do it?" And then she began quietly, humbly, volunteering to teach in remote villages, starting a garden on her tiny balcony, writing blog posts about the lessons life taught her the hard way. And the more she did it, the more something inside her began to glow, a light not dependent on anyone else. So when love finds her, she doesn't run, but she doesn't cling either, because she knows real love doesn't come to fix her. It comes as a gift, an addition. She's already healed in her own way. A woman living with true purpose becomes magnetic without effort. She no longer needs to dress up her soul for approval, because she's already accepted herself deeply and fully. And that's what makes her different. How could anyone look away from someone who lives for something that truly matters? So what are you giving your energy to each day? Are you building something that brings meaning to your life? Or are you using everything in reach just to numb a temporary emptiness? Write it down. Not for me, but for you. Because only when you get honest about that emptiness can you start hearing the call of your true purpose. Carl Jung once warned in the Red Book, "We must find the meaning in our lives, or we will fall into neurosis." If we don't discover meaning, we descend into anxiety, depression, or psychological disorder. He didn't say this to frighten us. He said it to wake us up. The mature woman Jung described no longer lives her life trying to avoid suffering. She lives for something so meaningful, so anchored, that it carries her through whatever pain may come. And when you live that way, you're no longer caught in blind love. You're no longer drowning in loneliness, because each day becomes an act of self-love. Whoever loves you after that won't be the reason you exist. They'll be the one who helps you take your purpose even further. Have you found what makes your eyes light up? If not, don't worry. That journey takes time. But you can begin today by asking, what part of me still hasn't been lived? What part still feels buried? Still waits for courage? Share with me what makes life feel more worth living to you. Because the most magnetic woman isn't the one most pursued. She's the one who no longer waits for anyone to give her permission to live fully. Number 5. She is on the path of individuation, not trying to be perfect. And that's exactly why she doesn't need to be flawless. Because what makes her radiant is not perfection, but becoming. There's no mold for her to fit into. No fixed destination she's racing toward. She has entered one of the deepest, most meaningful journeys a human being can take. The Path of Individuation, a core concept in the psychology of Carl Gustav Jung. In the relations between the ego and the unconscious, Jung defined individuation as the process of becoming an individual. And because individuality embraces our innermost, final, and incomparable uniqueness, it also means becoming your true self. Individuation is about becoming whole, not a replica, not a social role, but your authentic, unrepeatable self. For a woman on this path, each day is a quiet step forward, but each step carries the quiet joy of knowing she's living in alignment with who she really is. She doesn't try to dazzle all the time. She doesn't need to be liked by everyone. She knows that parts of her are still unfinished, still evolving, but she doesn't use that as an excuse for shame. In fact, it's that very incompleteness that gives her vitality movement life. Have you ever met someone who made you feel completely at ease? Not because they were always right, but because they didn't need to be right in order to feel accepted. Someone who admits their flaws without defensiveness. Who says, "I'm still learning," without apology. That's a sign of someone walking the path of individuation. They're not competing in the game of who's most perfect. They're walking forward with one question: am I more honest than I was yesterday? Such a woman doesn't measure herself against polished role models. She knows that behind every perfect photo lies hours of editing. She doesn't chase surface standards. She's after something deeper: authenticity. Jung described this shift as no longer living by externally imposed values, but choosing actions from the deepest, most personal inner call. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, he wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And a woman who lives by that truth no longer has to force herself to be someone else." Are you feeling pressured to always be okay? To always be strong, beautiful, accomplished just to avoid being left behind? Take a moment, pause, and ask yourself, am I living as a safe, acceptable replica, or am I risking enough to become my true self? Be honest. Sometimes, all it takes is one real sentence to begin the journey into individuation. A woman on that path feels peace, even when she's still in process. She's not afraid to be seen before she's fully ready, because her worth doesn't live at the finish line. It lives in the daily decision not to abandon herself. Maybe today she's tired. Maybe tomorrow she'll be sad. But she won't pretend. And that, more than anything, is what makes her magnetic. Not in the way of a flawless icon, but in the way of someone real. Someone alive, someone learning how to love herself, one honest day at a time. I once met a woman like that. She didn't have a dazzling career. She didn't live in a minimalist, curated home like in the books. But whenever I spoke with her, I felt fully seen, never judged. She shared her stories in a quiet voice, no preaching, no performance. When I asked her how she stayed so grounded, she smiled and said, "I just stopped trying to be the woman who's loved and started making peace with the woman who's growing inside me." She wasn't a superhero, but each day she made one brave choice: to live a little closer to her essence. She didn't need to know where she'd be in 10 years. She only needed to know that today, she wasn't betraying herself. That is the heart of individuation. Not a fixed plan, but a lived process. Jung emphasized this in Psychology and Alchemy. Individuation does not shut one out from the world. It gathers the world to oneself. This journey doesn't isolate you. It draws the world inward in a way no one else can replicate. That's why a woman on the path of individuation doesn't need to be loud. She doesn't sign up for spiritual branding or goddess programs. She doesn't try to match her clothes to her soul's color palette. She simply walks, with a heart still learning to love itself, and the awareness that every authentic day brings her closer to real freedom. Are you living like that, or are you still waiting? Waiting until you're stable enough, skilled enough, pretty enough, to finally allow yourself to be you Pause. Breathe. And answer that for you. It doesn't have to be right. It only has to be true. Because the most magnetic woman isn't the one who looks perfect. She's the one courageous enough to live unfinished without abandoning herself. True magnetism isn't something you can memorize from a book or buy from a shelf. It doesn't live in social media standards or in a perfectly rehearsed voice. It rises from within. When a woman dares to step into the hardest yet most beautiful journey of all, the journey back to herself, she is no longer ruled by the collective unconscious, where people move according to habit, fear, and social expectation. She has brought the unconscious into the light. She has faced her shadow, integrated it, and emerged carrying a light that doesn't blind, but quietly warms every space she enters. She doesn't need makeup to shine. She doesn't need to hustle to be chosen. She's not in a race to prove anything. What makes her magnetic is this: her honesty, her lack of pretense, her unapologetic imperfection, something no one else can imitate. And the most beautiful truth of all, this isn't a gift reserved for a rare few. Every woman, no matter where she is or who she is, can begin right where she stands. She doesn't need to wait until she's perfect. She doesn't need anyone else's permission. She only needs one thing to stop turning away from herself. Because when she dares to enter the dark corners of her mind, when she stays long enough and walks all the way through, she doesn't just find the light. She becomes it. And if you feel like you're somewhere along that path, or simply learning to live more honestly with each passing day, you are not alone. Let's keep exploring the depths of the soul together, through the lens of Carl Jung. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss future videos on the unconscious, the archetypes, individuation, and the journey of inner healing. And if this video stirred something in you, leave a comment below. I would truly love to hear your story.